0345 6060973. Lots of calls and texts and tweets from you. The first comes from Abbas, who is in Redbridge, and I don't want to rush the call, Abbas, so I'll get to you in just a couple of moments, if I can, after this on LBC. It's 1:13.
Darren Adam on LBC.
Chris Williamson's colleagues in Parliament don't really seem to have praised his idea. This is the reheating of Jeremy Corbyn's idea from a couple of years ago of women-only train carriages. Chris Williamson's the MP for Derby North, and he has floated this idea once again, or at least allowed it to be floated once again, and a sign has appeared on his door, on his office, mocking that proposal. It says, in fairly bold type, "Woman sexually harassed at work? How about working on your own floor? Sign up to this and other silly notions by emailing," and then his email address is given, and that's the sign that's on the door of his office now. But there is something at the heart of that, which is absolutely correct as far as I'm concerned. The logic of his position is that if somebody is being sexually harassed, or if a woman's being sexually harassed by a man, why doesn't she just take herself away? Place herself into a situation of isolation. That doesn't fix the problem. It's also placing the responsibility on her to deal with the problem rather than on the man to stop sexually harassing her. It absolutely does normalise that behaviour, doesn't it? 0345 6060973. Surprising number of us, 1 in 4 of us, or just under, according to a poll, suggesting that we actually agree with this idea for women-only carriages on trains. Are you one of them? Is this a serious suggestion? I'm not in favour. I'm quite aware, by the way, as you will be too, that I'm not a woman. I don't think that means we can't have the conversation, but I am conscious of never having been a woman who's been sexually harassed by a man. Abbas is in Redbridge. Morning, Abbas.
Hi there, good morning, Darren.
Hi there.
What I would say, Darren, is that I appreciate that it's unpalatable for a lot of people to accept the reality that we live in. But the reality is the reality. You only have to look at the statistics, and the statistics, I think, are quite condemning, in fact. 1 in 3, 1 in 2, in fact, some statistics say that women have been inappropriately touched or rubbed against or whatever in a train or in public transport. Now, that's the reality. Now, we can pretend that, we can solve it some other way, but the fact that there is a small minority of men who simply do not know how it is to appropriately behave around women creates the need, rather, for having women-only carriages. Now, women should be able to choose, though. Men, I don't think it should be men that should choose for them. And if a lot of women come forward and they say, yes, actually, we would like to have the choice of either travelling by ourselves or travelling in the mixed carriages, then that's their choice. And I don't think men should say, well, this is accepting defeat. It's not accepting defeat. It's accepting the reality that we live in.
But there are lots of realities which are unfortunate and unpleasant. We could look at any crime and say there's a crime that exists, that's a reality. That doesn't and shouldn't stop us from trying to eradicate or at the very least lessen that crime. And I don't think that this does.
No, but the two are not necessarily, opponents to one another. You can tackle it. You can strengthen the crime, the punishment. You can increase surveillance. You can increase police. But you know, and I know, Darren, that when you're packed in like sardines, if somebody has, a bad character and is quite frankly a misogynist and has no manners, then he will perhaps behave inappropriately and just say, well, the train was moving and I couldn't help myself, and it's very difficult to prove. But women are not that stupid. They know when something's going on and it's inappropriate, whether it's just the train moving. I've spoken to women about this, and they've been quite clear that, on 2 or 3 occasions, they remember where something happened, where they had to literally turn around and say, challenge the person that was doing what they were doing. Now, that's the reality that we live in, Darren. Now, we can sort of pretend that we'll be able to sort it out some other way, and quite frankly, I don't think we will. I mean, we do have a problem of misogyny even in our country. I think the Office of National Statistics reported that there were close to 100,000 rapes reported in 1 year.
Yeah. No, I'm not denying that, and
times that.
I'm not denying that there's a problem with misogyny. I'm not denying there's a problem with the number of attacks and the incidences of sexual harassment. I'm not denying any of that. But I think that one of the problems with this idea, Abbas, and we're plainly on the same side in opposing such behaviour. That isn't in doubt. But I think what this does, it's a very unfortunate and very significant side effect, if you like, that it inculcates among perhaps younger women, maybe even girls, the idea that men are to be feared. Men as a gender are there to be suspicious of in some way. And that can't be healthy, can it?
Look, I think women and men in our society generally are a lot more knowledgeable, a lot cleverer, than that, quite frankly. I think with women, even if they did have women-only carriages or had a couple of carriages where they had a choice to go into, especially during very busy periods where, as I say, people are packed in like sardines, they're not going to look at all men as sexual fiends or whatever. But what they're going to realise is that there is a small minority of men who, in effect, perhaps put themselves in that sort of situation so they can get away with the sort of abuse, and it is abuse.
But doesn't it at the very least run the risk of saying that all men are potentially abusers? Doesn't it at least run the risk of making that statement?
Well, all women and all men are potentially have the capability or the capacity to abuse somebody. But we have to deal with balance of probability, don't we? The reality is that if you go by public transport, ask most women who travel regularly what they have to go through. And unfortunately, as I say, it's a minority of men. It's always a minority in every case of every type of bad activity. But they should have the choice. Why do women, if we celebrate the fact that we want women to be able to choose how they wish to lead their lives, why would we as men then restrict that because it might make us look bad?
But I would. I mean, there's a lot of female Labour MPs here who are, colleagues of this Labour MP Chris Williamson, who have made the case this time, and also in reference to Jeremy Corbyn, who suggested this in 2015. They are saying, as women, that this isn't appropriate because it places the onus on women to avoid being abused and harassed.
Well, that is just nonsense because quite frankly, it should be the woman's choice. We shouldn't force them to go into women's only carriages, but if they choose to go there or they choose to go in the mixed carriage, that's their choice. And I think a lot of the times
are they somehow therefore in that case are they somehow more culpable if they decide to go into the mixed carriage and not use the female only carriage and they are sexually harassed? Does their choice make them more culpable in some way?
Not at all, because at the end of the day, if a man does that to a woman, as far as I'm concerned, he is 100% to blame, because there's no excuse whatsoever. We're not animals. We know what decorum and what respect and what society expects from us. Even if we don't have the ability to work it out ourselves, we know that it's illegal and it's wrong, and that should stop us if it's not our own character.
So what happens if a woman decides that she doesn't want to use the female-only carriage and she wants to use the mixed one as she does at the moment? She's then sexually harassed, and somebody says after the fact, well, you should have used the female-only carriage, because you can imagine someone trying to make that argument, not in defence of what's happened, but to try and, at the very least, make a case for it.
Well, Darren, those are the same idiots who will probably say that if this carriage is so full, why did you bother to get in? What I'm trying to say to you, Darren, is that a lot of the times I think the opposition to such a thought, to such a strategy of having women-only carriages, I think people are averse to it because possibly they think, well, other societies around the world that are seen as medieval and backward have already had this in place for many, many centuries. We don't want to be like them because we're modern. Because we are intellectual, we are far superior. Why should we go back to something that is apparently, in our eyes, medieval and somehow, backward? But the reality is that this is the reality that we live in. We can either deny it and pretend that we can somehow, stop it some other way. All you will ever do, regardless of the level of penalties that we place on, these type of crimes, regardless of the number of police officers that we have roaming the trains or CCTV, we know that in a busy carriage, unfortunately, some men are going to act inappropriately. They're going to act like, abusers as they are. And if a woman chooses,
but if that is known, then it follows that is going to keep happening, and it follows that we should then be able to learn from it happening and actually do something about it. I think again we can agree on this, Abbas, that there needs to be a more effective mechanism of prosecution. There needs to be a more effective mechanism of conviction and punishment. Because I don't think this is the case you're making either, but I don't think it's acceptable just to accept this as a reality and attempt to do nothing about changing it.
Absolutely. I think that at the moment, the sentences that we have for abuse towards women are, quite frankly, they are an insult, really. To get 5 or 6 years or 7 years for raping someone and destroying their life and possibly destroying their family's lives is an insult as far as I'm concerned. And when somebody inappropriately touches or does something and it's proven that they've done that, I think rather than get a slap on the hand, they should get locked up for a couple of years. But the point I'm trying to make here is that regardless of the severity of the punishment, we're not going to, unfortunately, whether we like it or we don't, the reality is that we are not going to be able to stop it completely. That's the reality. So if a woman, for example, has had bad experiences 1 or 2 times, and she says, you know what, actually, on the very busy times, when I don't get a seat, when I'm literally crushed against other people, my face in their armpit, maybe I'm going to take the women-only carriage. All
right, listen, Abbas, I'm going to leave that there just because we have made that point. We're in danger of going around in circles. But your point, very, very clear, that this is ultimately a choice that women should be able to make. And